Today we have 3 more speakers, and I'll give a brief introduction to them. All 3 of them have said that the program, they would like more time to speak with you, that maybe 20 minutes wasn't quite enough. We'll maybe adjust our schedule slightly with a bit of flexibility. First we'll have Nina Lundvall, who's an architect based in London. Previously she worked at Crusoe St. John's and was also responsible for the Leverance exhibition, as well as working on the City Library from 2014 to 2019. After Nina's presentation, we'll have a brief coffee break out in the lobby, and then come back for Luca Ortelli and Eva Eriksson. So, without any further ado, Nina.
Okay, can everyone hear me? Well, first of all, thank you so much for inviting me. I mean, it's a very special place to give this talk, and I think that the atmosphere of this cinema is a good setting for what I'm going to talk about, which is a lot about a kind of restoring of an atmosphere. And I just want to say, first of all, importantly, that Crusoe St. John were not the only collaborators on this project, and there are a few in this room today. So we had a local architect, Chevalier Svensson, who is now being rebranded as Gatum, and Roger Spets is here today. And then we have In Praise of Shadows, who were working as architects for the library, cultural institutions. So we got Katrina and Fredrik, and of course there were many other collaborators. So I just want to make that very, very clear. Okay, so I think, Patrik, you already introduced me. So I'm Nina Lundvall, and I worked for Crusoe St. John for 10 years as an associate director and project architect. And the library was one of my responsibilities, and I worked on it for almost 5 years. So I'm not going to go into the kind of the story of how it started and how it ended, but you're welcome to ask me afterwards. But we did reach a stage called Systemhandling, so we carried out the first 2 design stages, program handling and system handling. So this is a kind of, you could say, a summarizing render of what looks like nothing's changed. And I think that was, of course, important for certain areas of the library. So here it's the exterior would very much be about restoring. Yes, this is me on a ladder climbing the rotunda. And on the right is an 18th century painting by Joseph Gandhi, and he's depicting an architecture student on a grand tour of the classical order. And the interesting story here is that the phase, design and construction of Asplund's library coincided with a pivotal moment in architecture in Sweden, the end of neoclassicism and the beginning of modernism. And we heard yesterday Alti Magnuselov talk about Asplund's leading role in the 1930 Stockholm exhibition. As Patrik mentioned, the last project I worked on with Crusoe St. John was the Leverance exhibition at Arctis, which was an amazing project to work on. And here is a photograph that actually our graphic designers, who I should mention, Malmsten Hellberg, they took this photograph, and we worked on the graphics for the exhibition, and they also designed the book that went with it. And because I looked so much into the original material from Arctis, the City Museum and other archive collections, I got a deep knowledge of first-hand source material of both Asplund and Leverance. And there were quite a lot of people involved in the act of curation, looking at the archive material, then putting it together, trying to understand it, and then importantly, making something new from it. This is another drawing, which is partly about the Stockholm exhibition, which of course both Leverance and Asplund worked on. And this process of research and archival discovery, if you like, was important for both projects, so both for the Leverance exhibition and the Asplund Library. And there was an epic effort to record every room in the library, and this was led by our executive architects, Schwalle Svensson and Roger Spets. And here are some of the more important rooms that we surveyed. Of course, you can kind of see that, but you get an idea. So, you know, with every existing project, half of the project is the existing building itself, so the kind of taking time to understand and draw the existing is already half of the project done. Just in context of this project, I will show you another project quickly, because when we started the library project, I was busy as a project architect for another cultural institution, which was the Liverpool Philharmonic. And it was on site, so suddenly I had two large cultural institutions to work on. But much of what we learned from this project, we wanted to do in Stockholm. And we did these things in Liverpool. So this Art Deco hall by leading architect Herbert Rouse is of a similar time to the library, and the two buildings relate in proportions and formal interiors. And in both projects, there were new elements, reuse of existing structures, the making of new spaces, and working with existing historically important rooms. Our project was really three parts. One was the front of house, which was very much about atmosphere and lighting. So this is the box office at the ground floor. And so for us, it was really about raising the kind of intensity of the interiors and to match the spirit of the lost details. So it wasn't about restoring necessarily, but about restoring an atmosphere rather than restoring the original like for like. And the auditorium and stage was another big part of the project, but that was much more technical, to do with stage engineering and acoustics, and we replaced all of the ventilation system, etc. And then finally, we made an extension to the Philharmonic, which had a second music venue and a bar with a kind of curved glass window projecting the atmosphere of the music and the bar out into the street. So here is a photograph of, you know, as always, our meetings were, not always, but quite often in beautiful spaces. So when we had the meetings with the library, we were in the kind of old boardroom on the top floor of the library. And here, thanks to In Place of Shadows, we're having a meeting and a lunch. We cooked a nice lunch in Asplund Summer House. So this was a kind of glamorous moment in the project. So thank you for that. All right, so I call it a vision because it's, you know, it was a vision. It never went further than a vision. As you know, it didn't carry on. But we were three architects in this project, really. So I've already mentioned. And the client body was not one thing, but split with different understandings of the project and different priorities. So we were so-called house architects employed by the city of Stockholm and the owner of the building, We partnered with Stockholm-based Chevalier Svensson, who provided close support for us throughout the project as local architects. And Nyrens with In Praise of Shadows arrived after program handling and were commissioned as architects for the Library Culture Institution. And I would like to say that this split between architects is a very normal setup in Sweden, but we all understood instinctively the design of Asplund and worked collaboratively on renewing the cultural institution. So, our vision, I'm using our original vision for the library as a guide and structure for this presentation. We proposed a bold new institution where different cultures and different generations could meet and interact. The possibilities for contemporary libraries is enormous, with an increasingly diverse and accessible stream of data and progressively more cosmopolitan populations. So this is the original newspaper room with its entrance from Odengatan. And Stockholm City Library is special because of its history, atmosphere and architecture, and this project was an important opportunity to both imagine new roles for the library and to restore a historically significant architecture monument. This is the same space today, and while the original felt like an extension of the city, the existing felt intensely institutional, like something had been lost. And we felt that the library should continue to be used in the way Asplund originally intended, with a delightful lightness under the rotunda dome and an august status in the city. And we could do this by realistically and radically confront those parts of the existing building that no longer work well and did not support the library and what Stockholm needs. I don't know if you've seen this photograph, but this is one of the banana rooms, which are wrapped around the rotunda. And as you can see in this space, Asplund, I believe, was clearly interested in atmosphere and the theatrical. But in my experience of working on cultural institutions in different countries, the Swedish approach to conservation came across as somewhat different. And there are obviously some really important historic interiors in the library, but a lot of the rest was not seen as being important. It seemed like the original fabric, the physicality of the brickwork, for example, was more important to preserve than the original atmosphere, the sense of the building as an important public institution, and the threshold to the city that Asplund so carefully designed. So this is a historic photograph of these banana rooms, which held the erotic literature behind thick velvet fabrics. And I can talk a bit more about this question of conservation later after. So this is a photograph from the 1920s of Odentorget with the library behind, and Asplund was very much interested in atmosphere and the city, and so were we. So just to say something about the radicality of Asplund's design, I mean, it was pioneering, really, in allowing readers to gather books from the shelves themselves, as well as having a dedicated children's library. So already in 1928, it was expected of the library to facilitate equal access to literature, culture, and education. But then the library met a much narrower set of expectations, dug into the hill and continuing a tradition of custody and safekeeping, the library as a safe and secure depository of books. But this idea of the introvert library we felt was very interesting for our project, because essentially that meant that it was very much an interior project. It was about interior spaces. So here is a historic photograph of the rotunda, and of course the image of the library in 1928 was imposing, a kind of temple to knowledge, if you like, and consisted mainly of spaces for reading and for consulting newspapers and journals. And today the role is somewhat different. And what you can see here, a fundamental difference then and now, is that this was the main entrance up the kind of ceremonial stair from Sveavägen and the important line of security. Now, of course, today there are many entrances, not just one, and many of them are accessible to wheelchair users, etc. So it's more complex in that way. The rotunda is one space of many spaces now. In the existing rotunda, the furniture layout is very different today, and the central desk is gone. And what to do with the center of this space was something that occupied us quite a lot, and partly because it has this acoustic phenomenon which is rather troubling in the center of the space, where if you stand there, it sounds like you're holding a microphone, like I'm doing now. Right, so this vision was really three things, three kinds of change: restoration, as I talked about, easy adaptations, and radical renewal. So we proposed that the most significant parts of the building would be fully restored, with a conservationist eye, and the program of these spaces extended while their original character was revived. And the original qualities of the building would become more apparent as layers of ad hoc change over many years were removed and its ambience intensified. So this was an early kind of sectional perspective of the rotunda and two reading rooms, actually representing the original colour scheme, the first colour scheme, one should say. And of course, there's a big question of colour. And easy adaptations was really about an idea of good rooms, and the library already has these good rooms. So a good room is good for many different things, and we could make adjustments and adaptations to these. And then the radical transformation, or the radical renewal, was really about, it was linked to this idea that rather than a big extension to the existing library, the library could expand its capacity within existing spaces by extending the library into the plinth, which we called the bazaars, and I will explain that later. So I hope you can, I mean, this again was an early drawing, but it kind of shows the introvert rotunda and then this kind of horizontal space along the street. And this idea of the library becoming part of the street and presenting itself, you know, with a contemporary openness to the people of Stockholm would encourage curiosity and eliminate boundaries to learning, we hoped. And another kind of radical move in the project, I suppose, was this idea that the children's library could also become a lot bigger. And what you see here is a central space which is below the existing rotunda. It was historically used for book stacks, and today is used for the book robot. And we could free up this space by moving the book robot down one floor and turn this into a kind of introvert children's rotunda. So, to go a bit deeper, there were 4 ideas, 4 entrances and 4 ideas. The bazaars, which is the plinth of the building, the rotunda and reading rooms, the children's library, and the city foyer. And this early diagram kind of summarizes that. So the bazaars, I'll try and speed up a bit because I realize it's taking some time. But so yes, so this idea of extending into the bazaars. Now here's an historical photograph, and of course, while the library was fixed in a way, the plinth, or we'll call it the bazaars, were always changing. You know, it's the commercial space and the shops and other commercial activities have changed over time. As you know, now there's a McDonald's facing the park. And in the past, I think this is a picture from 1970s, there was this restaurant called Corso. And this is 7-Eleven today. So this idea of the transparency and the openness was incredibly important to us. And it also allowed us to create 2 new accessible entrances. So while the appearance of the city library is recognizable, precious and fixed, in contrast the bazaars, as I said, change as new tenants come and go. And this is a great place to register the reinvention of the city library. So we proposed that the bazaars could be rebuilt for use by the library with increased transparency and a direct connection to the busy life on Sveavägen and Nordengatan. And this drawing is actually by our interior artist here in Praise of Shadows, which I think encapsulates this idea. So this is a elevation of perspective from Nordengatan. And to the park, we proposed a cafe, and the idea that in fine weather the bazaars could open to Observatoria Lunden and draw this landscape into the experience of the library. And these new spaces would become the library's most obvious place of exchange, playing host to events, spontaneous exhibitions, lectures, new media, old media, and coffee, etc. And this is an historical photograph that, of course, inspired us very much, because it represents this idea of the Stockholm exhibition, the modern metropolis, adverts, lightweight canopies, the glazed facades, a very different kind of the city than the neoclassical library. And of course, both Asplund and Leverens worked on the Stockholm exhibition, and you can see here, you can see the kind of similarity between these 2 architectures. So, now down to some kind of specifics. So, although the idea of extending down was easy to imagine, the actual method of doing that was quite complex. As you can see, the existing is not, well, it actually is not physically connected to, the bazaars are not physically connected to the library, and you can see that in this section here. But the idea is not new, and so not that radical, and this is a drawing by Hans Asplund, which was the son of Gunnar Asplund. So he took over after his father's death, which was quite a tricky project, I think, to take over from his father. And he did a few projects at the library which were largely about access. So he installed a new set of lifts. And these lifts he brought down to the level of the bazaars in the anticipation that maybe one day the bazaars, the library would actually extend into the bazaar. So this is what the plan is showing on the left in the section. And and Hans Asplund, he was a very good architect in his own right, and this is a photograph from his fantastic kind of public foyer space in Medborgarhuset in Eslöv. And he understood how to work with a deep plan, with courtyards and roof lights and so on. And he did, as you can see, propose some lighting. And so the other challenge of the bazaars was the height of ceiling. And it was 3 meters at the front and 2.7 as you moved closer to the buildings. Not really a suitable height for a public space. The section at the bottom is our initial proposal, and we could achieve 3.55, which we felt was just about doable if we could have no services in the ceiling, but we would put the services in the floor. And this is the kind of latest section of that, which also shows the staircase moving up into the library. And here is the flooring plan and of this new bazaars. And what you see on the top left is the rotunda floor, which was referencing the Pantheon, and we were referencing the rotunda floor in a way, with this kind of idea of the square and the circle. And what you can also see here is the staircase up, the existing lifts at the back, a little theatre underneath the stair, and then a cafe to the park. So I'll skip through these things. And here are some kind of axonometrics showing that. I think I have to speed up. A view towards the stair. So this rawness of the concrete, that was very much about not having any linings, but actually I think we felt it could be white concrete rather than this kind of brutal concrete. And then in the depths of the plan, at the back we would use color, and these colors were kind of vivid versions of the Pompeian original colors in the reading rooms. And this is the little theatre under the stair. I mean, it's quite a brutal proposal, I suppose. But perhaps imagine a whiter concrete, but it was a very muscular, very intense structural moment, which is why it's so incredibly chunky, because this is underneath the ceremonial stair, and today it's resting on earth, and we were proposing a connection underneath it. But then we were able to introduce the two circular openings, and this was not about fashion, it was about something else. And this is a staircase in the library, back of house. And I believe there's a staircase here in this building somewhere with a similar feature, I suppose. And this is a cafe to the park. All right, now I'm going to skip through the rest very quickly, actually, because I feel that it was most important to talk about the vision and the approach to the library, the idea of atmosphere, the kind of question of conservation. But I will still go through this very quickly. And so so I talked about the bazaars, and now just a bit about the rotunda and reading rooms. And I will focus on the kind of idea of furniture, because I talked about this idea of easy adaptations, and we could see this idea extending also to the furniture, where the furniture would have a dual function. So a bookshelf could also become a seat. And this was a way of kind of managing all these new functions and programs that the contemporary library wanted. And here is a kind of illustration of the rotunda furniture, which we placed in a radial pattern, like the original layout of furniture, and then introduced something in the middle. And I'm sure this would have changed if we'd continued the project, but I think the principle was established. And of course, that work followed a careful survey of all the furniture that we could find by Asplund in the library. So, for example, there was this idea of the plinth that he had that sticks out a bit, that we could see in many of the furniture, and that was something that we borrowed. So this is one of the reading room where we introduced a new piece of furniture to respond to what library wanted, which was about not just private reading, but spaces where you could read together in a way, you could have small conversations. So this was about creating a kind of microclimate, a little acoustic room with the furniture. Okay, so the children's library, I mean, this image here, of course, is one of the most famous spaces in the library, the storytelling room. And we discussed this yesterday. And it had a single focus, which was the librarian reading from the book with a light and the backdrop of John Lund. So, as I mentioned, these diagrams really talk about the possible extension of the children's library into the round space underneath the main rotunda. And again, this was quite a structural challenge because it's not level with the entrance at that level. So we had to we proposed to lower the floor. And so this is kind of represents that. And then, of course, you know, with the children's library, there were lots of consultation with children as well. And then trying to find any kind of space for this new extended program. So we even used one of the courtyards. But one key idea, I would say, was to do with the entrance. It was about reopening the original entrance, which you can see on the left is quite a special space, not dissimilar to the main entrance space, and top right is existing, just the entrance is closed, it's just another reading room. And then the picture on the bottom right is the stair, because as I mentioned, the rotunda space there is up a flight of stairs, and then it has this kind of this amazing little water fountain, which wasn't functioning as a water fountain anymore. So we made drawings for the City Museum, and to prove, I guess, or to show the view from the entrance, which we would open up again from the park, looking into this new rotunda, children's rotunda, and then the repositioning of that fountain in a kind of little room where you would take off your shoes before you enter the rotunda. And they accepted this proposal. So here is the plan. What's in dark grey is the existing library, and what's light grey is the extended library. And I just quickly, I'm coming to the end of this presentation, so I don't know what time it is, but I will just show a few views now of the atmosphere that we proposed in the existing historic children's library spaces. And again, it was this idea of duality. I think it speaks for itself, this view, hopefully. And also about lighting and toning down, you know, the brightness in a way, making a cozy environment. And of course, I mean, all this furniture, it's not fixed, it could be replaced in the future as well. So there was like, we felt there was, you know, a little risk involved. So we restored the finishes. We could restore the finishes of the spaces. So the lino flooring, the paint, the bookshelves, which we proposed to paint dark grey, and then adding these furniture, we responded to new programs and functions. And then finally, just a few slides to talk about the city foyer. I don't know if you remember, but at the very beginning I showed you these two photographs of the city foyer historically. It's an incredible moment. You know, you could say where the city comes into the building, and then the institution on the left. So what we proposed was quite simple, which was really about access to literature again, because Odengatan, with the new infrastructure at Odenplan, would become even more important as an entrance. So we proposed a city foyer, which was a little bit like a bookshop, or a place for kind of inspiration. And the library had this idea which I thought was fantastic, which instead of showing the books with its spine, you would show the book with its front cover. And such a simple act suddenly made the content so much more accessible. So that could be audiobooks, it could be physical books, it could be iPads, things like that. So a bit like an Apple Store. And here is the last slide, I think. Yeah, this is the last slide, which just shows a view of that city foyer with the books, with lots of air around them, and a new stair that would lead down to the extended bazaars. So that's the last slide. Thank you very much for listening.